Who do you think is behind these caravans? A lot of speculation that it's George Soros.
George Soros.
George Soros.
The likes of Soros.
A Conservative MP had to apologize after tweeting out something that was deemed to be a conspiracy theory about billionaire Hungarian-American financier George Soros. Now, if you don't know who George Soros is, well, you're probably a normal person. I'm not. I've been following this man for a long time. He is, as a friend of mine likes to say, a spooky dude. But does criticizing George Soros and the billions that he spends on political activities in the United States and around the world make someone an anti-Semite? Well, I've never criticized Soros over anything related to his Jewish faith or his Jewish upbringing, however he wants to put it or describe himself. And many of the people that I learned about George Soros from and who continue to criticize him are themselves Jewish. So does criticizing George Soros make you an anti-Semite? I want to bring in, Toronto Sun columnist, editor emeritus, all-around great guy, mentor, and friend, Laurie Goldstein. Laurie, does criticizing George Soros make me an anti-Semite? Should I be worried about that? Are you an anti-Semite? Laurie Goldstein, do you hate yourself and your entire family?
Is the government of Israel anti-Semitic for criticizing George Soros, which they have done in the past? No, of course not. There are all kinds of, the analogy I would use, and this is how the left plays this game. George Soros is a globalist.
But hold on. I've been told the word globalist is anti-Semitic and it can't be used because it's code word for all the Jews are coming to rule us.
He's a globalist. He funds, he's funded Black Lives Matter. Some people may agree with that. Some people may not. He made his money by financial speculation. He's known as the man who broke the Bank of England by shorting the pound.
Didn't he also help crush the Russian economy as they were coming out of communism and kind of in some ways paved the way for Vladimir Putin?
Well, that's what speculators do. They in an economic crisis, they short. Now, when he did it to the Bank of England, all kinds of pensioners, obviously the values of their pensions went down because the pound went down. So that's controversial. He supports the BDS movement, which basically calls for, according to the Parliament of Canada, illegitimately, the delegitimization of Israel, the world's only Jewish state. He funded groups of BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, that have been condemned by the Parliament of Canada. So now, you can agree or disagree with him on what he's done in his career. He was also convicted once of insider trading, but that's sort of like, who isn't when they do financial speculation. He's a very controversial man. He supports left-wing projects and has given billions and billions and billions of dollars to them. He's a big supporter of the Democrats in the United States. The idea that those criticisms are somehow anti-Semitic, let's go to the left's boogaboo, the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
Same thing. Very rich, wealthy, very involved in Republican politics. They have been called every name in the book by the left, but that's okay because they are Republican financiers. It's not okay. It's not okay to attack George Soros because he's a Democrat. The one thing I will say, the argument about anti-Semitism goes back to a very specific thing, and this is a false accusation against George Soros, which is that he collaborated with the Nazis. He did not collaborate with the Nazis. He was a 14-year-old child. In order to save him, his parents put him with, I believe it was a Christian person. One of their jobs of that Christian person was to go around and I believe take the belongings of Jewish people. And he was 14. He was doing it as all kinds of people were doing it to stay alive.
There were a lot of people that didn't have a choice. It's you do this or you die. Exactly. But let me play devil's advocate on that, because Pope Benedict was a 14-year-old boy at about the same time, and he was in Bavaria, Germany, and they came around and told him you have to join the Hitler Youth. A lot of people have denounced him in saying, well, you have to atone for that. Well, does the same argument apply? Does George Soros have to atone? Or do you say, well, Benedict was a 14-year-old boy and the Nazis had guns?
Well, Soros had a a lot of this came from an interview he did with 60 Minutes, where he was asked whether he had remorse, and he said he didn't. He didn't because, he's now an adult being asked if you felt remorse when you were a child. And many people felt that he should have been remorseful. But Brian, that to me, that is such an infinitesimal thing about what you can legitimately criticize George Soros for. Yes, you can look at every person in the Holocaust and how did they act, and did they act with honor or didn't they act with honor. But that's not, to me, the criticisms of George Soros are what he's done for the rest of his life after that.
In some of that, I absolutely disagree with the politics that he's funding. And so that to me is entirely legitimate, and yet somehow the left has been able to turn the language around, and any criticism of George Soros is anti-Semitic. And yet they will say that completely anti-Semitic attacks on Israel are not because, well, it's legitimate criticism. It's a bizarre argument to have sometimes with the very same people.
Look, basically, there is no logic to this. This is the old technique, the propaganda technique of you create an enemy. I was scrolling today in preparation for this just through the internet. You do George Soros, there's story after story about how the right has unfairly attacked him for being, and it's anti-Semitic. You go through the Koch brothers, and it's vilification after vilification after vilification in the media of the Koch brothers. So come on, folks. Let's stop the silliness here. Both of these, the brothers, and one of them has passed away, and Soros are controversial figures. They made their money through however they made their money, speculation and other things, and they have political views, and they use their money to forward political views that many people on both sides disagree with. And that's the point. In a democracy, we're free to criticize people because we disagree, not just with their views, but with their using their wealth to do things that we disagree with. The idea that any criticism of George Soros is anti-Semitic is, I worry about this nonsense, because the problem is when, look at it on the other side. The same people, of course, who are this, Stephen Harper was a Nazi. Mike Harris was a Nazi. As if the left has never played that game. And the problem when you do it, when you throw around these terms, is that you don't make the Nazis or Hitler worse. You make the person that you're normalizing them. You're saying, well, he was like Hitler. Oh, wait a minute. Stephen Harper wasn't that bad, so I guess Hitler's okay. You only use those terms when they are absolutely appropriate to use, and there are very few figures in the world where you compare people to Hitler. Stalin would be one.
Mao, yeah.
Of course, but you do not use those terms, and that's what bothers me.
Well, it's the line is, if everyone's a Nazi, no one is a Nazi.
No one's.
And you're right, it cheapens it, it demeans it, and I think it does that with anti-Semitism, which is a real problem, which is a scourge that you deal with that I don't. I hear it, but it doesn't affect me in the same way that it does you. It may repulse me, but it doesn't impact me in the same way. So throwing around any criticism of someone who is Jewish is anti-Semitic, well, if they're on the left, then that's bad. So we can't go down that road. Loy, thanks for helping walk us through this.
Take care.
All right, if you've got thoughts on this, make sure that you drop us a line below. You can leave a comment. You can share this on Facebook, on Twitter, what have you. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well.